Some of my fondest adult memories of my dad are the last few Christmases we spent together. He, my brother, and I would trade jokes, my mom would share scripture, and there was always lots of love. But back to the jokes.
So as far as things when I remember Ronald, it's fun and jokes from day one.
Turn around and smile, act like you got a personality. There you go, yeah. Not that.
You know, I gotta get ready for so some nights I'm be cooking for everybody.
All right. Oh man, that's bad. We don't even know what night that is.
Well, everybody knows that Ronald had that dry humor. Sometimes he would say things, and I would think that it was a fact. And he's not the type that would say things, and he knew he was being comical, but it would come off like he was serious.
That's for me.
Mommy.
Oh,
you got a roll.
wow, strike.
Oh, it does match your house shoes.
Strike roll, that's hot roll.
That is nice.
Is that a hood? Was there a particular reason you didn't get rabbit?
I couldn't get it. Dad.
Yep, he always had jokes. My father, Ronald Emanuel Salter, was born on the south side of Chicago, growing up the third oldest of 4 brothers.
So he was a little curly-haired baby, and cute as button, big curly locks. And I just, from my mom, just wanted to hold him and cuddle him and see who this new kid on the block was.
As a boy, he did well in school and was drawn to English, especially poetry. He could read for hours, but by 13, this honor student got bored. He started delivering papers before school each day. Then soon, he started as a stock boy at Hilo Foods, and while he loved his time there, he was still looking for more.
He wasn't devilish, but he was always getting into something, I can tell you that's for sure.
I remember him, and I remember a lot of stories of him as a teenager. Ron used to want to be a thug. He did. He just used to like to hang out with the bad boys in a way, but he was a strange mixture because he was a good student, A student, he was very smart. He worked a job, but he liked the excitement of the thug kind of lifestyle. And back then, you know, they were not like thugs today, I guess you would say, but they were guys that would stay out late, drink on the corner, hang out and do certain things. And he ran into some issues with his parents when some of those things came up where he wanted to hang out with the wrong crowd, and you know, Grandma and Papa were not having it at all.
His parents, George and Frances Salter, were highly respected in the community and very active in the church.
The chairman of the deacon board, and he was very involved in the church. And my mother was the chairman of the senior choir.
Perhaps it was spiritual intuition that would cause his mom to one day prevent him from making one of the biggest mistakes of his life. On the south side of Chicago in the 1950s and 60s, young black males were either considered Ivy Leaguers, which meant they were preppy, or Gousters, which meant they were street, and both groups dressed the part. A story my dad had told us several times throughout his life, I later discovered fully typed up and placed among his poetry. He wrote, "My decision at age 13 was that I had learned pretty much all I needed to know from a school point of view, and now I had to learn how to be tough and cool." One night, unbeknownst to his parents, he and some friends had decided to go out looking to get into trouble. Not liking the hat and coat his mother bought him, he used the school clothes money she had given him to purchase a wide brim hat and a long coat. Finally, he would look like a Gouster. Or not. When his mother discovered him in the attire, she quickly ordered him to change out of the new ensemble into his old hat and coat. Later that night, on the newly built Dan Ryan overpass, he and his friends were confronted by actual Gousters who thought he was too young to be out that night when seeing him in his hat and coat. And while his life was spared in the confrontation, sadly, he would witness the fatal stabbing of a close friend that night.
they killed his friend, and Ron saw that, and he talked about it all of his life. It had an impact on him. But he always looked at, man, I was so mad at my mom for making me do this, but right after she made me do that, change my hat, I was embarrassed that I couldn't wear my big gangster hat, but I saw where it literally saved my life. And I think he used to always talk about that. I think that had a profound impact. He had to go testify in court and all of that, so it got pretty big and pretty deep there.
The tragic night would shift his focus back on school, and after graduating high school, he would work and attend junior college for 2 years while saving to go to Southern Illinois University at the suggestion of his best friend who had already found them a place to stay. But after 2 years of working and attending junior college full-time while also paying rent to his parents, he soon realized his savings would not be enough. When he went to confront his mother with the news that he would have to stay in Chicago instead of going away to school, she surprised him by giving him a passbook to a savings account she had set up 2 years earlier in his name. In it was every dime of rent money he had ever paid his parents. He would be going away to school after all. He enjoyed his time at SIU, where he would pledge into the Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity and graduate with a bachelor's degree in accounting.
And we were really proud of him when he graduated from school, and we were really proud that he had done the things he had.
But the celebration would be short-lived. Immediately upon his return from school, he received the news that he was being drafted into the Vietnam War.
But Ron gets drafted. Oh man, and everybody is just, everybody's upset. I remember my mom was upset, she's crying. His mom's upset, she's crying, and everybody was, and Ron was scared to death. He didn't know, oh man, I guess we made it worse for him. But when you're drafted, you have no choice, you have to go. We had, I remember having like a going away party for him and things of that nature, and he went away to boot camp, and he comes back and he's got his uniforms and the combat clothes and all these things.
As he entered basic training, he would take the advice of his older brother Roger, who encouraged him to use his leadership and administration skills to guide him during his time in Vietnam.
And lo and behold, that's what happened. Ron happened to have a degree. He had graduated from college. So when you have a degree, you go in more as an officer status or somebody that is not right on the front lines. He ended up working in the office, and he was a secretary, and then he got involved in booking entertainment for the soldiers. They called him Hollywood out there. He actually had more fun in the Army than he did and anything else he did, really, it seemed. And I remember he would come home for, I guess they call it a furlough or something. He would take some breaks, and he would come home, and we would have little parties for him, and we'd be praying around the table. Very religious family. Papa would always be praying for his safety.
After 2 years of service, his family's prayers were answered when he returned home safely. At the wedding reception of a mutual friend, his return would also reunite him with the young lady whom he had met 2 years before.
We weren't able to make the wedding, but we did come to Maria and I did come to the reception, and that's where I bumped into Ronald again. And so, from then on, I can't remember exactly what all happened immediately after that. But by that time, he was working at A.B. Dick, and he had to go on a business trip. When he returned, then we started going out. He was very down to earth. He just seemed to be himself. He was very poetic. We'd be talking, and then he liked to quote. He had favorite poems that he had already memorized, and every day we'd be talking, and then we'd be in the poetry zone. And I kind of liked that about him. I said, well, that's different.
Soon, they were not only spending time with each other, but with one another's families as well.
He was very warm and friendly and easy to know, and I felt close to him right away. And as I got to know him a little more, I found out he was charismatic. You know, he was smart. I loved the way he learned his poems and memorized them and sprouted them out at any time. But yeah, I liked him. I liked him from the very beginning.
After 3 years of dating, they were married. And 3 years later, they would welcome their first child.
Oh, Ronald was a wonderful father, very hands-on. He was just, like I say, very hands-on. He and I, we had, even though we had Natalie in our early 30s, we had just as much fun doing things that helped, that were fun for her. Her first birthday party at her first birthday party when she was a year old. We were just always excited to do all these things.
After settling comfortably into family life, it was time for him to tackle another big goal of passing the exam to become a certified public accountant.
That was his goal, to pass that CPA exam. And Ronald was very focused. As a matter of fact, he loved to study. He loved to read, he loved to study. And he actually we had a walk-in closet in our apartment. And he actually used that as his little office. He cleared it out and then put a little desk in there. It was actually large enough to make a little small office. And so that's where he would go in there, and he was very focused with that because he was determined to pass that test. And some of his friends would ask him to come go here, and then there would be family events, and he would decline because, like I say, he was determined to pass that test. And that was an exciting time for him.
After 2 unsuccessful attempts, the third time was a charm. He passed the exam and was now a certified public accountant. Soon after, he went into business for himself.
Because he had been the head accountant at DePaul University with their school of sports and so forth and so on. So he was the head accountant there. And I was always talking to him about being in your own business, because my parents had not had their own business.
The type of business that he went into, you know, as an accountant, as a certified public accountant, you know, with that field, you can work for a company or you can work for yourself or your clients. He always went above and beyond the call of duty for his clients that he did work for.
As his business began to expand, so did his family, as he welcomed his second child, Ronald David Salter, into the world. But new beginnings would become painful endings, as he would say goodbye to his mother, Frances Gazelle Salter, who passed away just 1 month later. The last day we came from the hospital, that was one of the first times I seen my dad sad. You know, when you're a kid that young, you're not used to seeing your parents in a position of helplessness, I guess. He was upstairs laying in my parents' bed, and it was just the blank look that he had on his face, and I could tell he'd been crying. And of course, because of the devastation of the loss of a parent. But as I got older and began to hear stories about my dad and his relationship with his mom, I just really began to understand how special it was and how unique, I'm sure, the relationship she had with all of her sons, my uncles. So, but yeah, I remember that day and that time. Prior to her passing, she and my grandfather had been married for over 58 years. And just a year later, he too would pass on. The stress would put a strain on my parents' marriage. And while he poured himself into his work, my mother began spending more and more time in church.
So he was used to the church environment, even more so than me. But when I became involved with it, and he would be working a lot, and Natalie would be always actually in church with me a lot. So, and there was some things that I refrained from doing. You know, we didn't go clubbing a lot, but when we were invited to parties there at a club or something, you know, we used to go. We see no problem with it. But then, as I began to get involved with the Bible and what the church and the Bible, I became maybe overly with it. I realize that now that I'm more mature.
After a brief separation, they reunited. And while they continue to work through their challenges, we continue to be a close-knit family spending lots of time together.
And those Friday nights would always be fun because Mom would come and pick us up on some of the weekday nights, but then on the Friday nights, I remember around maybe 5 or 6 or 7 and stuff like that. When we were going to Emmanuel, Grandma would always come to the back and say, Dad was here. We didn't know, we didn't have cell phones back then, so we never knew, when he'd show up. But usually Dad would show up before Mom, and it would be a Friday night, and he'll have, we watch VHSs back then, and food, whatever, he'd already have it, and that would always be fun. It'd always be a treat when Dad would come by to pick us up on a Friday night, and we'd go places. We probably didn't go too many places. We just went home, but he'd already have the food and the videos for us to watch when we go home, and that was always nice when your grandmother comes in the back and says, your dad's here, and we see him up front with his suit on and his hat and his long overcoat. He looked like an important man, and on that note, I didn't know what he did for the first several years of my life. I just was wondering, like, wow, this guy's always wearing a really nice suit. I was like, wow, hopefully it's something very important. But yeah, those are my best early memories of him.
While my mom kept us on a steady diet of healthy eating and Christian cartoons, my dad would definitely sneak in the occasional junk food in one of his favorite movies, The Godfather.
If you were around Ronald, you would know a lot about The Godfather. That was his movie, and he made me learn it and understand it, and you had to communicate with him on his level, because if you didn't know what he was talking about, things would go over your head. So we had a lot of fun with that. We could cite every line of The Godfather, 1, 2, maybe not 3 so much, but 1 and 2. So we just had a great, our lives were just so interwoven.
By the mid-90s, my parents would renew their vows. My dad also began attending church with us shortly after my mom joined the Abundant Life Teaching Center. He rededicated his life to the Lord and developed a lifelong friendship with the pastor, the late James E. Watson. He also would become the accountant for the church and the resident poet. His faith would take him through the losses of his oldest brother, George, and his favorite aunt, Willa G., with whom he would spend summers as a child. Towards the last few years of his life here on earth, he and my mom grew closer than they had ever been. They celebrated their 30th wedding anniversary, and my brother and I found ourselves spending more and more time with him as well.
We had the typical father-son relationship. It was a loving relationship, but it came with some wars, because fathers and sons have wars, and they clash a lot. But overall, it was a really good bond that we had, especially in the later years when I got to be a little older and, be more mature. We had some good moments driving him back and forth to the office a lot, getting to know a lot more about him. And, I think our bond actually culminated once he stopped driving as much. And I had to take him to the office more. I would say from the ages like 22 to 24, maybe 21 to 24, probably. I had some pretty good bonding moments with him, up until the end.
I began to appreciate his spirituality and how he and my mom would pray every morning for several people on their daily prayer list. I appreciated his sense of humor, which I began to see in me more than I ever had before. This is why I would play along whenever he would play a different character each time I called the house. Like when he would answer the phone, Joe's Fishery, and I would place an order for fish, but he would say, "Oh, we don't serve fish here." He would pass away unexpectedly just 1 week after a 30th birthday celebration that I had with family and friends. And it was a blessing that so many loved ones got to see him before he passed. And to this day, I see him in the faces of my children and when I see my uncles. And I remember how he would go so far as to leave notes under my door so as not to end an argument on a bad note. He left this earth on a Friday, and as anyone who knew him could tell you, just like Fridays, he was so much fun.